Welcome everybody to our first iSchool colloquium for the spring 2025. And we're super excited to host Professor John Reinhardt, who's one of our faculty affiliates here today. And I'm going to read his bio. Dr. Jonathan Reinhardt is a professor of English and second language acquisition and teaching at the University of Arizona. And he's the current president of Calico, which is the Computer Assisted Language Instructional Consortium. And his research focuses on computer assisted language learning and pedagogy, especially with popular technologies like social media and digital games. And we're super excited to have him here today, and I'll let him share his screen and kick us off. And thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie. Let me share this. Okay, here we go. Yeah, thank you for inviting me. My name is John Reinhardt. I'm a professor in the English department. But as Jamie explained, I do research on technology and language teaching and learning, especially newer technologies, and digital game-based language teaching and learning is one of my main areas. Another area, and I was thinking of giving this kind of talk to this audience, is on media literacy and language. And I have had the pleasure of meeting and getting to know Diana Daly's work. And we are talking about all of the potentials there with thinking about how disinformation, propaganda, misinformation, and its connection with language use. That's something else I look at. So part of my heart is in the College of Information Science, and I'm really excited to share this aspect of what I do with you. And it's from my perspective, which I'm an applied linguist. I train teachers. I think about English language learning as a second or foreign language. Myself, I come from a background where I have learned a lot of languages: German, Japanese, French, Spanish. I'm learning now. And I think about, how am I learning it? How are other people learning it? And what does that mean for how we might teach it? So this is my talk. These are just some questions to start off thinking about this topic. The main question, why and how are games? And when I say games from here on, I mean digital or video games. Digital is sort of the academic term used in second/foreign. Another term people use is additional. The other term that people use, my field is so full of acronyms, it becomes kind of ridiculous sometimes. So try your best. If you have a question, please feel free to ask. But second and foreign language learning and teaching, sometimes L2LT. So what has research found on digital game-based language learning and teaching? What are the issues with the designs of educational or serious games for language learning and teaching? And if you're somebody who designs games, or you think about educational games in particular, I hope this is of interest to you. And then, why aren't there as many serious games for learning languages as there are for learning other subjects like science, math, etc.? And these are just overarching questions. Maybe we can discuss some of these after I talk here. I imagine I'm going to have about 30 minutes or so of things to talk about with you. So this is from a study I did, just scanning the internet and looking at how people talk about how they use games, how they use digital games for learning language. And what I call L2 gamers. So L2 gaming means playing a game in another language, maybe for the reason that you want to learn the language, or the language, but it could also just be because the game is not available in your first language. And this is really the case with learners of English as a second or foreign language, an international language around the world. Anytime I give a talk like this, somebody comes out of the audience at the end, they're like, "Oh yeah, I learned English through Call of Duty," and you're like, wow, this isn't in any textbook. This isn't what we tell teachers of who are learning to become English language teachers. The other thing they also mention, interestingly, is Friends. Like everybody, the world has watched Friends, the world has learned English through Friends. So television, media, and now games are huge. Can you learn a language by playing a video game in that language? It depends on a few different things. And this is sort of the collective wisdom of what people are offering. Play any game as long as it requires the meaningful use of language. So you have to use the language in order to play the game. You have to comprehend, you have to communicate in it, you have to make choices in the language. And it's not just making the choice. As a matter of fact, it may not at all be the choice of, is this grammatically correct or not? That's not what it's about. It's about, do you understand it? Do you comprehend it enough so that you can play? So play familiar games. This is one great bit of advice. A game that you know, a game whose genre you're comfortable with at the right proficiency level. Don't play something that is too complex. Uh, Something that integrates a lot of multimodal language use. And what that means is why games have such power for learning a language is because it's not just some abstract written word on a page. It's somebody saying something, somebody telling you something, and everything around you, multimodally, the image is telling you what the meaning is. The sounds, the words, the actions, everything is in not just written language, not just spoken, but it's also images. Play games that have useful features for learning, like subtitles, captioning, ideally that you can turn off and on. Repeatability, you can play it over and over again and you still enjoy playing it. And pausability, and this is something that's huge. And I don't know if you've learned a language where you find that people are talking so fast and you just didn't get it and then you just lose it. But if you can pause it, if you can go back, that makes it even more powerful. Play the game in an informal yet intentional way. And again, this is what I was talking about before, where you kind of feel like, yeah, you might be learning a language, but you're really playing it, and that's the key to play. Use external language resources like dictionaries. Keep a notebook of the words you're encountering. And then this last part, interact with other players and use these external game resources like community forums, like streams, like walkthroughs, those kinds of things in the language that you're studying. This is great advice. This is coming from how people are doing it in the wild, as we say in my field. And these are, I think, important for us to situate our research practices in when we're thinking about it. So what has research found? And this is where I'm heavily involved here. Um, First of all, digital games can offer the affordances, which means the opportunities to associate form, meaning, and function relationships. So in language and linguistics, we talk about a word has a form, a word has a meaning, and then it has a function. It does something. And so understanding those relationships are helped again by these multimodal contexts. Manipulate time for clarification and repetition of input and output. A computer, an NPC, doesn't care how many times you ask it. It can just be asked the same thing over and over again. And if you can control that, it's great. A game can allow you to practice something to mastery because it shelters you. It gives you this space where you're safe and you can practice and try. And this is the whole idea behind tutorial levels in games, is that that's where you get to practice in a way, and it doesn't matter how many times you die, for example. Games have you set and achieve goals and earn rewards. And they give you targeted feedback just as you need it when you need it. They tell you how you're doing and you know how you're doing. And this is something that I try to get through to language teachers in general, in that telling a learner, telling a student what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what they're going to get if they do it, and along the way, tell them how they're doing at it. That's how they're going to learn. Um, so negotiating goals and actions with other players using the language, and this is in language learning. It's called languaging. So we're doing something with the language. We're actually figuring something out together, and in that negotiation, that's where learning happens. It's so powerful. The next one, performing and perceiving through new identities. And the idea of being able to go into a game world, let's say an MMO, and take on an avatar who sounds nothing like you actually, is very empowering for learners because people aren't necessarily going to judge you as a learner of language, which many people judge in real life as something deficient. They're going to judge you by how well you play the game, how and your looks in the game. Everybody knows is some sort of a shell, so that's powerful. They can be played anytime, anywhere. This is something that's great about technology and how it has afforded us to be connected anywhere. Of course, there's uh, the backside of that too, the double-edged sword. And then learner autonomy. And this is something that's very important is when you're learning a language, you should be learning how to learn a language and how to do it independently, eventually without a teacher, without a textbook. So this is really how you learn languages, whether in a game or not. And that's, again, what makes digital games so powerful. Okay, so here are some examples. I'm gonna just go through some of these. These are some of the things that research has looked at. First of all, The Sims. As you can imagine, Sid Meier calls this a digital dollhouse. And you can think about playing with dolls. You have characters, you have everyday objects, you have relationships. You can manipulate these. You can think about language. Now, you might be asking, well, Simlish isn't a language you'd want to learn. But the way that teachers have used this is for students, for example, to play the game and learn some of the vocabulary as they are, setting up their house, building their characters, and then maybe they come back and they write a story about it, or maybe they do a little video tour of their house and they do it in the language that they're trying to learn. World of Warcraft is a big one. MMOs, and I'll talk about this in a second, have been researched because in MMOs, as you know, roles are distributed. People are taking on different roles. And in order for them to accomplish many of the quests, they have to collaborate with one another. And in order to do that, they have to use language. So it's this joint collaborative effort towards a common goal. Shintaku up above, this is called Boku no Natsu Yasumi, My Summer Vacation. And she was a SLAT student here, a PhD student here, and she looked at how students use this as a resource for learning Japanese. And what's cool about this game, it's just a role play. It's kind of like a simulation adventure game where you're not really, there's nothing particularly violent about anything. You're sort of living the life of a kid on vacation at his grandparents' house in the country, and all these little things you can do. And the great thing about this is that there is no time pressure. You can just sort of do things as you want to do them. And all of the conversations have these wonderful subtitles that are right there that you can easily repeat. So she looked at how students were playing this game and using all the different resources to figure out how to play it. Ibrahim in the middle there, he was using a game designed to teach Egyptian street children how to run a booth, how to run a shop. And he asked, what are you thinking, learner of Arabic, as you play this game? What are you thinking as you play this game? And what's going on through your mind? How are you figuring out what the meaning is? Among Us in the upper right certainly has been used, and this is another great game because it sort of has this mystery, and you're not sure who is the suspect, who did what. In order to figure out, you have to talk. You have to use language in order to figure out together as a group who did it. Lee, this is her story. This is a game about a woman talking to the police. And what's interesting is you have to figure out this mystery of what this woman did. And this person used this game as a way to prompt students to write in English as a foreign language. They were Korean students. And then invent the kinds of texts, the kinds of resources that you might find that support this activity. So maybe a diary that somebody kept, maybe a report that somebody kept that had to do with the storyline. So it was sort of like a fan fiction-y kind of thing. This land is my land. This was used by a student, by a teacher who had the students watch a movie. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe something like Dances with Wolves, and then play the game. Another teacher had students read a book and then play the game. And interestingly, they found that the students who first read a book and then played the game learned a lot more than the students who first played the game and then read the book. Also had to do with their background. And then keep talking and nobody explodes. You might be familiar with. It's kind of like Among Us. You have to figure out who did it and you have to communicate. And man, you better communicate clearly or else you're going to lose the game. And again, communication's at the heart of it. So more pegs, as I said, work really well. And you can see in these four terms massively. It can be played with strangers or with friends. And this is key, communicating, potentially communicating with other people. Multiplayer, you have to collaborate, you have to cooperate, and resources are distributed unevenly so that people have to, in order to trade them, in order to collect them, in order to use them together, they have to communicate. Online, you can play it anywhere, anonymously, which helps a learner, autonomously, and then role play, right? Role specialization. You have the magic trio, I think it is, where you have the healer and the tank and the DPS, and they all have to negotiate when they're working together. Encouraging identity investment through your avatar. You know, you sort of take on, this is sort of a D&D thing too. And then all of these stories. And stories are so powerful in their ways to help us learn languages. What other genres should work well for language learning? Action adventure games, contextualize language and narratives. They promote goal-oriented activity. Multiplayer cooperative games require coordinated collaboration and role taking. Strategy simulation games promote planning, problem solving, system thinking. And interactive fiction or visual novels offer engaging stories and a slow pace, repeatability. And you have to understand what somebody is saying in order to make the right choice. So Assassin's Creed, you might be familiar with, has been used in a lot of different fields like history. And one of the things that makes Assassin's Creed so great is that it's just so rich in stories, right? Don't Starve Together. This is a great example of, you know, it's a survival game where you take on these different roles and you have these different powers and you have to communicate in order to survive together. And that has such potential that those particular mechanics have potential together for any kind of game that is going to teach learning a language. And then this is just a little simulation game, Life Quest, where you take on a character and you have to find a job, you have to get a place to live, you have to interact, and it's all scripted and it's all pretty straightforward, but it's daily vocabulary, which is nice. And then it's self-paced, which is nice. So these are potentials. These are potentials out there for how we might build games for learning another language. What do teachers think when they're choosing one of these commercial entertainment games? Well, they're thinking about what is the language proficiency level, right? Is this language that's being used in the game the right level for my students? And ideally, you would be aiming for 60 to 80% comprehension. So if you have less than 60%, it's going to be hard. If you have more than 80%, it might be too easy. So sort of a sweet spot is what they'd be looking for. They're thinking about the proficiency of their students in terms of can they play games? What are their gaming literacies? How hard is it for them to play? If they don't play games, would it be boring? Would they get frustrated? And if they're an expert gamer, would it be too easy for them? They're looking at how the language is used in the game. Does it, again, require meaningful use of language? Can you play it without even understanding the language? That certainly is the case with many games out there that don't really require you to comprehend what's happening, especially if you've played that genre before. And then how adaptable is it to using it in the classroom? Like, would you be able to fit it into the curriculum? can you make a useful learning activity out of it? So in that sense, you think of it as, like you're going to teach a movie or you're going to teach a novel. You're going to teach a game. You're going to work with this game to figure out how can we achieve and reach our educational goals by mediating this game. So, what do learners want out of a serious educational game? If you're going to make something that is specifically designed for language learning and teaching, what do all of the stakeholders want? Well, the learners want something fun, right? All players want something fun. They want something effective, right? They don't want to waste their time, really. They want something convenient that's not too hard to figure out, but also easy, not too expensive to play, that sort of thing. What do teachers want? Well, they first of all want something effective. They wanted to make sure that it actually does work. They want something, I wouldn't say the word fun, you might just say the word engaging. And that's sort of a more powerful word because, if you're playing a game and you're grinding away, right, you're just doing the same thing over and again. Are you necessarily having fun? I'm not sure you would call it fun, but you could definitely call it engaging. And the games that get you into that flow state really have that power to engage you. And then integrated. Is it integratable, as I said before, into what I'm doing in the classroom, what we need to do? What does the market want? Well, the market wants something that earns a profit. The market wants something that is something that will last a while, that will get people to pay for it. And this is, I think, a challenge for developers and designers if they want to commercialize their game and make something out of it, make some money out of it, is how do you reach both the learners and the teachers? And then the last thing is how do you take advantage of the latest technology? And this is something that I think game developers are constantly chasing, right? They want the players to have customized experiences. AI is now growing in its use. Everything. It's certainly. I mean, I was just having a conversation yesterday where people are like, "Yeah, it might be that you're going to be able to just tell AI to build you like a little game, and boom, it's going to like come up with a code." And I'm like, "Whoa, that's pretty huge." On the other hand, my experiences with AI as a tool for learning kind of make me ask, why do I need to use AI for this? Or it just seems so full of problems. And then the networked aspects of allowing people to play together through a network multiplayer. Okay, so what kind of games have academics built? Not commercial game developers, but academics. This might give you an idea of what people are looking for, what they see as useful. School or campus-based games. So these kinds of games set the student in a space that is the actual school or a fake school and have them go around and do things, interact with people, complete various quests, read various texts, achieve various goals on a campus as if they are a student. Study abroad games, a similar thing where you are a student and you just land in, at the airport in your country that you're studying in, and you have to make your way to, have a series of quests and goals that you have to achieve. Maybe get some money, get a taxi, get into town, find, where you're staying, meet with your classmates, go to school, get food, that sort of a thing. Treasure hunts. This is, I think, has always been used even before digital games. And this is the idea that we are in a place, maybe like a city or a building, and we have to find things. And in order to find things, we have to discuss and solve problems. And maybe there's an aspect of mystery solving or escape those are the next two. Solving a mystery, so the idea of something has happened and we have to figure out what did it and we have to do it together. And then escape games, like how do we get out of something that we're trapped in, or how do we work together to solve some puzzle, right? Puzzles are great because they are not they can connect language, but they're also engaging and they can involve multiple people. Place-based games, I'll show an example of that, actually using geolocation technologies. Hybrid games I've seen where people are, they have some digital interface or they have something on a mobile phone, and then they actually also have some physical pieces to the game that are boards, that are cards. And then unfortunately, they've also built what we know in the field as drill and kill activities, and this is just to drill somebody on language, uh, hoping that somehow just by repeating the same thing over and over again, or thinking, just changing one word as you go through this drill, that you'll learn it. And there isn't really the science to really support that so much, but that's what people think language learning is, especially people who haven't really studied it, people who haven't learned, what other alternatives there are, or maybe they're just recalling their own experiences in language learning, and they think that's what they should make. So that's why I put that adjective bad there. So here's some examples of some of the games. Practice Spanish, study abroad. I know, isn't that just an amazingly like creative title for a game? It's like, wow, I totally want to play that game. Uh, I consult a little bit on this, and basically they just had you go to this fictional city and you had to interact with people and speak with them. ¿Dónde está? No sé, no veo a David. And then you have to just like meet up with your two students, and the interface is pretty nice. And they sort of figured out you have money, you have time, you have health, you have, the language score. Um, I think the problem with this particular game is that it was too realistic. It was too serious. I thought, well, couldn't you have, some mystery? Could you have some ghosts, that you had to interact with? Could you have some bad things happen or mysterious things happen, some funny things happen? But it was just kind of like such a simulation that I think students they weren't engaged. It wasn't fun for them. Space Team ESL is a great game created by, I think, in Concordia University in Montreal. And this is basically free, which is a great thing. All the students play on a local area network, just with Wi-Fi. They all have their cell phone. So this is the cell phone interface. And what you have to do, the pretense is that you're on a spaceship and it's crashing, and you have to communicate with the other person or the other team what they have to do. So they say something like activate red guys, and they have to comprehend and press the red guy button. And that requires comprehension. Well, first it requires the first player to comprehend it, and then it requires the person who's listening on the other side of the room to comprehend it and respond appropriately. And if you do, you save your spaceship from crashing. And this is a very basic design, but it's been so well received. People love it so much. And it's pretty basic, but again, it works. It works, and it just takes advantage of these very sort of basic mechanics that fit. It doesn't try to do too much, but it fits with what learners, especially at a lower, high beginning or maybe low intermediate level, need in English. This game I was just looking at the other day. It's called Lingo Legend, and it is a little online mobile role-playing game for learning Spanish, and the graphics look amazing. It's super cool. You have these little creatures that you have to interact with. And I went through and I kind of placed myself at, maybe low intermediate with Spanish. And then it starts giving me this. First, it tells me mi boca means my mouth. And then the next screen, asks me my mouth. Choose mi boca or la piel. And I was just like, this is the simplest thing I've ever done. I cannot believe this. If I were a student in a class and this was happening, I would be bored out of my mind. I mean, it just seemed so simplistic, and I was just like, what are they thinking that this is going to engage people? This is also very, very sparse in input, and this is a key element that games need to be effective as learning tools. They need enough input. So these are some of the games out there. There need to be more. You can, and I think maybe it's because people use these commercial entertainment games to learn languages because they're authentic texts in some ways. But there is a space for serious games. What about Duolingo? Well, is Duolingo a game? That's the first question. I was at a conference last year, and Luis van Aan, the inventor of Duolingo, admitted that when he first did it, it was a PhD student's dissertation project, and they just grabbed the book Spanish for Dummies off the shelf. Since they didn't know anybody who had expertise in language learning, even though they're at a major university, they could have found someone, but they use that. And now they are involving more consultants and experts who have some training in language pedagogy and second language acquisition. But Duolingo, I think its problem is that it just doesn't give you enough, and it doesn't give you enough listening. And to learn a language, you have to have listening and you have to be immersed. It doesn't immerse you as much as it needs to do. Um, so how to get started if you want to do this? Well, play games in other languages yourself. Try it. Observe how people are studying languages, how they're learning languages effectively. How are you doing it? Look at textbooks and workbooks. Look at how the activities are designed. How could you gamify this activity? Design physical prototypes, right? Cards, boards, tabletop games. Think stories, mysteries, escape games, and parlor or party games. What can people play together? And then this is sort of the essence of it, is to design gameplay so that players must use the language, the L2, meaningfully to achieve the game goals. And meaningfully is, meaningfully, does it mean shooting down like all past tense verb endings? That's going to teach you that sort of gamified drill and kill learning. Sure, there's some element that's fun to it, but I would suggest that your game also includes something that's immersive, something that is stories. I think that is at the heart of how we learn languages. You can't really get above a certain level unless you are no longer translating. So games that rely on translating really are best for beginning, but even then, you've got to immerse yourself. They don't take a communicative task-based approach. They don't have set goals with rewards. They don't have they don't require communication to achieve the goals. They may focus too much on accuracy and getting the grammar right, then developing fluency, which is an important aspect of just learning to produce the language, hearing faster and faster speech. They don't immerse the players. They use too much English. So that one game I showed, it was just like all the instructions were in so much English, and then you'd had like one tiny bit of the target language. They forget about these proficiency levels and progression. They don't realize that, learning is something that is progressive. It's a development thing. And this is honestly the worst absolute game, and I would not imagine that these games are out there, but these are sort of what I see. They focus too much on vocabulary. Vocabulary is a low-hanging fruit, but they may not use spaced repetition, which is the gold standard for learning vocabulary. You learn something, and then slowly it gets you're exposed to it at longer and longer intervals. They focus only on words and not long texts. They don't contextualize the grammar. They don't say how the grammar is used, and they don't show it in the real world. Everything is sort of taken out of context. They overlook the power of stories and storytelling, which I think is really key because a story naturally contextualizes everything and it engages people. They ignore skills like listening. Listening is the basis of language learning. And then culture. Culture is hard to get in there, but it's something that's an important part of learning another language. And then finally, this about educational game design. And I think these can apply to any kind of educational game. I love this idea of playing in order to learn as opposed to learning in order to play. And when people are playing in order to learn, that's sort of what the teacher might think. That might be what the designer or the developer might think. But the player, from their perspective, they're going to learn whatever it is to play the game. And so it's going to be the motivation of having fun, of enjoying themselves. And if they have to learn something to play it because they like to play the game, they will. Not recognize the cognitive overload that is involved when you are playing a game and trying to also learn content. And especially if you're doing it in another language, that becomes very hard. And studies show that, that's what frustrates a lot of people. You can't really learn the rules of a new game that you're not familiar with in the language that you're trying to learn. It's a lot to do. Thinking about multiplayer, that's very important. People learn by interacting with other people. Forgetting to include fun tasks, thinking about, I think that there's a place for just doing activities and quests or tasks in a game that aren't necessarily connected as closely to the learning goals, but are just about having fun, something more action, something that focuses on a different play style or skill that isn't necessarily connected. That's why I love open world games that have a lot of different sort of mini games built in. Not giving enough feedback about the learning besides the gaming feedback. Over relying on the graphics to motivate. A good game is a good game, and traditional tabletop games still have motivating qualities, even though they're not super graphics based. Not thinking about how the game might be integrated into a curriculum. And then this idea of one game to rule them all, trying to do everything. And this is, I'm constantly telling the developers that I'm consulting on, why are you're trying to do everything in one game? But I think there's a lot of potential for targeted casual mini games that know what they're doing, they don't bite off too much, and they do it well. So, concluding, digital games have great potential for learning a language, but there's a lack of well-designed educational ones. Many find commercial entertainment games effective instead. Why? It's because they're authentic, and in order to play them, you have to use language to communicate. Many in the field have researched games, so consider educating yourself, finding a consultant. Don't rely on your firsthand experience of learning a language. And I think this goes probably to any kind of serious or educational game that you're designing, to think about, what are the learning processes behind it, and how does this particular field think about, what is necessary? Your own firsthand experience doing it, sure. This is something we face in English all the time. People are like, well, I speak English, so I can teach English. I'm like, well, there's a little more to it. And remember, different stakeholders, different audiences have different needs from a game. Uh, and then remember that people will learn something in order to play a game, but it's harder to get them to play something, even a game, in order to learn it. So that's all I have. Thank you so much. This is my book, my website, and my email. Please feel free to contact me at any time if you want to talk more.